My name is Jenna, and for most of my life I believed I was just a burden, a mistake, the daughter my parents never wanted but couldn't quite get rid of. Growing up, I lived in the shadow of their disappointment, not because I did anything wrong, but because I existed, and they never let me forget it. My mom, Doreen, once told me when I was 8 that I was an accident that cost them everything. I didn't ask what everything meant, I just nodded like I understood. And then I cleaned up the juice I had spilled, because I thought that was my job. My father, Walter, was quieter about his resentment, but it showed in the way he called me girl instead of my name, in the way he celebrated my brother's smallest achievements like they were Olympic victories while ignoring my straight A's like they were nothing. And my brother Drew, he followed their lead. He once told me, "You're just lucky to live here. Mom says they almost gave you up once." I laughed when he said it, but I didn't think it was a joke. I got used to being invisible. At school, I kept my head down. At home, I became useful. I cooked, I cleaned. I took care of things no one asked me to, because if I wasn't wanted, I could at least be needed. On holidays, I watched as my parents gave Drew gifts wrapped in silver and gold paper while mine came in plastic grocery bags, if they came at all. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't about gifts, that family didn't owe you affection, that some people are just less lovable. But deep down, it tore me apart. There was one person who made me feel different, though. My grandmother, Margaret, my dad's estranged mother. I only met her a handful of times when I was young, but I remembered her clearly. She had this presence. Strong, graceful, always wearing pearl earrings like a queen in a dusty farmhouse. She'd sneak me cookies and say things like, "You're going to do something great one day, Jenna. Don't let this house make you small." I never forgot those words, and then one day, she was just gone. My parents told me she passed when I was 11. No funeral, no memorial, just a short sentence from my father. "She's gone. And no, she didn't leave you anything." That was it. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I didn't know then that he was lying, that there was something she had left, something that could have changed everything, and they buried it, just like they buried her. Years passed. I graduated high school with honors. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. They were too busy helping Drew prepare for his football tryouts. So I stood on that stage alone, and I decided, then and there, that I was leaving, for good. I took out student loans, got a job at a bookstore, enrolled in community college, and later transferred to a state university. It took me 6 years to finish what most people do in 4, because I worked full-time while studying. But I did it. No help from them, no calls, no visits, and no inheritance, or so I thought. I didn't hear from my parents again until I was 27. It started with a short, guilt-laced message from my mom. "Hope you're doing okay. Your brother's wedding is coming up. Thought maybe you'd want to come." I stared at it for 10 minutes before responding. I wasn't sure why I agreed. Maybe some part of me still wanted to be included. Maybe I just wanted to see how much they hadn't changed. Spoiler, they hadn't. At the wedding, I was seated at the back, near the restroom. They hadn't even listed me on the printed family banner. No mention of Jenna, sister of the groom. Just a collection of posed photos of Drew with my parents, all beaming with pride. I tried to stay civil. ate my tiny plate of chicken, smiled at strangers. But when I saw my father raise a toast and say, "To our only pride and joy, our Drew," I nearly choked. I left early, and I told myself that was the last time I would let them humiliate me. But the universe had one more twist waiting. 2 months after the wedding, I got a call. It was from an estate lawyer named Evelyn Marks. She asked if I was Jenna Carter, daughter of Walter and Doreen Carter and granddaughter of Margaret Carter. I said yes, cautiously. She paused and said, "We've been trying to contact you for a long time. Your grandmother left a letter and an account in your name, in trust. It's substantial, but there's something you need to know." I felt dizzy. "What kind of letter?" She hesitated. "It was hidden. Found recently when the contents of a safe deposit box were re-verified during an audit. It's dated from the week before your grandmother's death. And it names you, very specifically, as the sole beneficiary to her remaining estate." I couldn't speak. "I thought she left me nothing." Evelyn's voice dropped. "Your parents never told you. The account was under legal hold due to some contested filings. But once the documentation was reevaluated, your name came up. The trust is legally yours." I couldn't breathe. My own parents had kept this from me for over a decade, while I worked double shifts and slept in basements and skipped meals to afford textbooks. They let me suffer, let me believe I was unloved, unwanted, while sitting on a truth that could have changed my life. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what they stole from me and the person they tried to erase. And suddenly I knew. They weren't going to get away with it. I stared at the screen long after the call ended. My heart was racing, but it wasn't joy, it wasn't even shock. It was rage, years of it. Quiet, suppressed, heavy rage, the kind that builds layer after layer until it becomes part of your bones. They knew. They had always known. And they let me believe I was nothing. I met with Evelyn, the estate lawyer, the following week. She was kind, older, with soft hands and sharper eyes. She handed me a copy of the letter my grandmother had written. It was on ivory paper, creased from age, written in looping cursive. "To my Jenna, I always knew you would grow into the kind of woman this family didn't deserve. If you are reading this, then my final wish has found you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to protect you from the coldness I saw in your father long ago. But you were never invisible to me. This is yours. All of it, because you are the only one who knows how to survive without taking from others. With love always, Grandma Margaret." I cried in Evelyn's office, the kind of cry you can't hold back, the kind that feels like grief and justice and ache all rolled into one. Evelyn slid a folder across the table. "The account has appreciated over the years, real estate, stocks, bonds. Your grandmother was smart. What was once modest is now a bit more." I opened the folder. There were too many zeros. I stared at it like it belonged to someone else. Evelyn continued. "It was kept in trust with the condition that it not be distributed until either your 25th birthday or confirmation of identity. Your parents filed a claim saying you were estranged and uninterested. That's how they stalled it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They lied. They tampered with legal filings. They tried to erase me on paper. But they failed. I took a breath. "Can I sue them?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "You have every right, and with what we've found in the estate audit, The forged signatures, the delay tactics. You may even have grounds for fraud. Fraud. My own parents. I remembered all the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough. All the years they let me struggle. And now, I had the power to confront them, in a courtroom if I had to. But first, I wanted to confront them face to face. I drove back to the house I swore I'd never return to. My childhood home, pale blue shutters, cracked driveway, the same dead roses my mother never watered. I parked the car and took a deep breath. I knocked once. My mother opened the door. She blinked in surprise. "Jenna?" I stepped inside without asking. She looked me up and down, that old familiar mix of judgment and irritation. "You should have called." I ignored her. "Where's Dad?" "Out. Probably at the hardware store. Why?" I turned to her. "I know about Grandma. I know what she left me. I know you hid it." Her face froze. That's when I saw it. Not guilt, not regret. Fear. She closed the door. "You don't understand the full picture. We were trying to protect you." I laughed. "Protect me? From what? Having a future, a roof over my head, from knowing that someone actually cared about me?" She said nothing. I walked through the living room. Same couch, same dusty curtains, same framed photos of Drew everywhere. No sign I had ever lived there. I turned back to her. "Why? Why would you hide something like that from your own daughter?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because you never knew your place, Jenna. Always asking questions, always trying to act like you were special. You weren't supposed to be part of that will." She was confused. Old. "We were just setting things right." I took a step forward. "You were setting things right for you. You didn't even let me go to her funeral." Her voice rose. "She didn't want one. She was a bitter woman who pitted us against each other." I stared at her, stunned. "You hated her, but you still cashed in on her silence." She turned away. I knew I wouldn't get more out of her, so I left. But not before saying one last thing. "You took everything from me once, but I'm done letting you win. I'm not that little girl anymore." The next day, Evelyn filed the paperwork. A formal claim of inheritance obstruction. A demand for full access to the estate's historical records. And a separate suit for damages, including interest lost over 10 years. I didn't do it for the money. I did it so they'd know. I was done being erased, and I wasn't finished. Because buried inside the estate paperwork was something even more shocking. A second letter, this one to my father. It was shorter, colder. To Walter, "I know you will try to take what isn't yours. You always did. That's why I left clear instructions and why you'll be receiving nothing. If you still believe I never saw through you, you were always easier to read than you thought." And it was dated the day before she died. I brought it to Evelyn. She shook her head slowly. "This explains everything." But to me, it opened a new question. Did my grandmother really die of natural causes? Or did something more happen? Something that my parents were hiding even more desperately than money? The second letter haunted me. It wasn't just the bitterness, it was the timing. Written the day before my grandmother's death. Sharp, pointed, deliberate, and full of warning. Something didn't feel right. Evelyn, the estate lawyer, had told me Margaret passed in her sleep. Peacefully, with no foul play ever suspected. But now, with everything I knew, I couldn't stop the question that burned in my chest. What if it wasn't natural? What if they had taken more than money? I requested the coroner's report. It took some convincing and a few signatures. But Evelyn helped me navigate the red tape. When the file finally arrived, I sat alone in my apartment, hands trembling as I flipped through the pages. It said natural causes, heart failure. But something stood out. There was no autopsy, and that was strange. Because according to Evelyn, Margaret had no prior history of heart disease. She had always been healthy, even at 76. I asked Evelyn, could someone have declined an autopsy? She looked grim. If the next of kin signed off, yes, that would have been your father. I went back to the old house. I didn't knock this time. My dad was in the garage, hammering something on the workbench like he hadn't ruined half a lifetime with silence. He looked up, surprised. What now? I walked in slowly. I found her second letter. He froze, just for a second. Then he said, she was paranoid. She'd been slipping for years. I took out my phone. Did you sign off to block her autopsy? He didn't answer, just clenched his jaw. I stepped closer. Did you lie to the coroner? He finally spoke. We didn't lie. We just didn't want to drag it out. She was old. She was angry. She made her choices. I stared at him. The man I had feared, tiptoed around, spent my whole life trying to please. And I realized something in that moment. He wasn't powerful. He was cowardly, and I wasn't afraid of him anymore. If you had nothing to hide, I said quietly, you wouldn't be shaking. He looked down at his hands, and they were trembling. I walked out without another word, but the question still echoed in my head. Was there more? Back at home, I opened the last box of documents Evelyn had given me. A sealed container of Margaret's old letters and personal papers that had just been released from storage. Inside was a notebook, a worn, floral-bound journal. I flipped through pages of grocery lists, gardening notes, random thoughts, and then I found it. A single page, torn, folded, tucked between pages. March 9th, he came to the house again, asked about the will, pretended to be civil, but I saw the same hunger in his eyes as always. I've moved the final copy to the bank, locked under Jenna's name. If anything happens to me before it's delivered, I pray she finds the truth. I don't trust them, I never did. And now, I'm sure they'll come for what isn't theirs. I sat there for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just still. Because everything I'd feared, everything I had tried to reason away, was right there in her handwriting. She had seen it coming, and they'd done nothing to stop it. I took the journal to Evelyn the next morning. She flipped through the pages, brows furrowed. We may be looking at something bigger than inheritance fraud. If your father pressured her, or destroyed documents, or forged signatures, it's possible there's a case for elder abuse. I felt my stomach twist. That wasn't just a lawsuit, that was criminal. But before we could file anything, something unexpected happened. I got a call from my brother, Drew. We hadn't spoken in years. I hesitated before picking up. Hello? His voice was quiet. Hey, I heard about everything. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you're trying to take them down. I didn't answer. He sighed. Look, I didn't know about the will, about Grandma. I swear I said nothing. Then he said the one thing I never expected. But I found something you should see. I met him the next day at a local diner, neutral ground. He looked older, tired, nervous. He slid a folded paper across the table. It was a receipt from a notary, dated the day after Margaret's death, for a document labeled Amendment to Estate Will, signed by Walter Carter. my father, but Margaret's name was forged. I looked at Drew. Where did you get this? Dad asked me to shred it years ago. I kept it. I don't know why. I swallowed. This was it. Proof. They didn't just hide the will, they tried to change it, to rewrite history. I took the receipt to Evelyn immediately. Her face was unreadable. This changes everything. She began filing papers that afternoon: civil, criminal, probate court, fraud investigation. It would take time, but now they couldn't hide anymore. As I left her office, I looked up at the sky. It was the same dull gray as the day my parents had told me my grandmother was. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt full. 2 rows of benches. My parents sat stiffly at the defense table, avoiding my eyes. Drew sat behind me, quiet but present. The only family member who'd chosen to stand beside me. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. The forged receipt, the journal entry, the dated letter from my grandmother. The room felt like it was holding its breath. And then the judge spoke. This court finds compelling evidence of fraudulent interference with a legally binding estate. The original will, journal entries, and dated letters indicate premeditated concealment of assets from the rightful heir, Jenna Carter. My heart thudded. The judge continued. The court hereby orders all assets from the Margaret Carter estate to be transferred in full to the named beneficiary, Jenna Carter, and refers the matter of will tampering to the county prosecutor for further investigation. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my chest start to lift. Outside the courthouse, my parents walked past me like I didn't exist. No apology, no anger, just the coldness of people who'd been caught and couldn't undo it. I didn't speak to them, didn't need to. They had lost something far greater than money. They had lost the narrative, the control they held over me for decades. And I wasn't their daughter in the shadows anymore. I moved into the house Margaret had left in trust. It was old, but sturdy. The porch swing still creaked the way I remembered from childhood visits. The wildflowers in the garden had grown out of control, blooming like no one told them to stop. I spent the next few months restoring it, painting walls, fixing windows, planting lavender by the fence line. It was mine now. And not just because of a legal win. Because I chose it. Because someone, one person, had seen me, believed in me, and left me a future when no one else had. One afternoon, I found a letter I hadn't noticed before, tucked behind a kitchen drawer in Margaret's house. It was dated the year I turned 10. Dear Jenna, I don't know when you'll find this. Maybe never. But I want you to know something. You were never the problem. Your light scared people who were too afraid to shine. Don't dim yourself to fit into places that want you small. If the people meant to love you, don't. Build a life where love isn't a performance but a presence. And never forget, some of us saw you all along. Love, Grandma Margaret. I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was broken, but because I was healing. Because I was finally safe enough to. Years later, when reporters asked why I never sold the house or cashed out the estate, I always gave the same answer. Because money was never the point, my voice was. And now, I had both. I started a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name, for girls like me. Girls raised in homes where love came with conditions and worth was something you had to earn. And every letter we send out with those scholarships includes her words. You were never the problem. My parents eventually moved away. quietly. Disgraced. We never spoke again, and that was okay. Because some chapters don't deserve sequels, some endings are the closure. And me? I built a life that would have made Margaret proud, a life full of voice, purpose, and freedom, a life where I am no longer the unwanted daughter, but the woman who reclaimed her name and rewrote her story.